At some of the early societies, all right, that developed, and we rehashed because obviously they all developed because of certain things. So the first society, remember, happens in Mesopotamia. That's where we begin to see the very first cities and the development of, well, sorry, I was just throwing up random thoughts. The development of complex societies, okay, where it's more than just, farmers and people and hunting and gathering, all right? And so when we have agriculture, all right, and I just put here effects, because that's one thing you should remember. What are some of the effects of humanity's development of agriculture? More jobs, okay, number one. Not everybody has to be a farmer.
Surplus fruit.
Yes, extra food. And what does extra food mean?
More people.
More people, yes. Less people are starving to death, all right?
I was going to say population.
Okay, population increases, yes. So all of this happens, and it leads to, whoever said, more jobs. Not necessarily jobs, but people begin to develop other skills and other professions. All right? And so, yes, our villages become towns, our towns become cities, and we begin to see the formation of complex societies. Okay? As that happens, and this was like the new stuff we were getting into, remember, we begin to see now that we have that division amongst the farmers and then the other professions, the other jobs, okay? We begin to see a difference between the people that dwell in the city, which is typically the ones with different skills, okay, versus the farmers that live outside the city, because obviously they need the land, they need the space for their crops. But they are interdependent, okay? What do the city dwellers need that the farmers have? Food. And what do the farmers need that the city dwellers have? I heard like 3 different words, but they were whispered. I'm sorry? Water, okay. Clothes, because they're the ones making it.
Money.
We could go with money, maybe in a couple thousand
years. Is
years.
this not like around the time where they use money, or is this like the part?
This is a little bit before, but later, yes, they need to get money. Tools, yeah, that's where everything is made. So tools, baskets, wagons, all of the things that they need to make, sorry, you guys are the farmers, to make the farms run better, okay? And of course, the city people need food to be able to make those things. So they become interdependent. And of course, we can't forget the pastoral people, the ones that focus more on animals, okay? They also live outside the city, but they're not around a whole lot because typically throughout the year, where do they find themselves?
Pastors.
Yeah, they got to take their animals, whether it's sheep, goats, cows, pigs, whatever, out into the hills, into the valleys, wherever there's pasture, wherever there's areas for their animals to graze, and then they come back. But what do they provide to the societies? Both to the farmers and the cities? Food, yeah, but specifically what kind? Meat, all right, and what else?
Dairy.
Dairy, anything related to dairy. And non-food items?
Okay.
Yes. I'm sorry?
Okay.
There you go. Okay, so now, little by little, granted we're talking, a couple thousand more years, we begin to see the development of different social classes. All right, certain professions are considered to be quote unquote better than the other ones. All right, and of course, probably the biggest thing we see during this time is an explosion of technology. All right, and no, we're not talking about farming. We're not talking about this technology, okay? But what kind of technology? The wheel, yeah, you're like, no, it had to be invented at some point. All right, so we're talking about the wheel. All right, what else did they discover?
Parts.
Yes. Okay. I mean, I know it's not a Tesla, but it's one Frank powered. All right, you're pushing it. All right. What else? Ooh, has to do with metals.
Oh.
need to know this.
Bronze.
Bronze, yes. Somehow along the way, someone figures out that if you take copper and tin, see, I'm already mixing it together. Copper and tin, melt it down, all right, mix it up, you get bronze, all right? So yes, all right, this development of technology during the time. And so the new divisions, okay, so we've got city people versus farmers. All right, we've got, higher classes, lower classes. We see the wealthy versus the poor. And then the last thing we kind of looked at, okay, because now we've got all of these societies, okay, we need rules. We need, someone to enforce the rules. We need someone to make the rules. We need consequences for the rules. So we begin to see the development of very early government. The earliest form of government that people have, all right, is this warrior king, the strongest man in the tribe, the best hunter, basically tells everyone else what to do. Okay, but eventually, now that we have a city, now that we're not so reliant on that kind of physical stuff, okay, that becomes hereditary, okay, but pretty soon we need people to manage, the commerce. We need people to manage how are we going to divide up the water, because we got that canal going through the middle. How are we going to levy the resources out to different people? All right, so we've got now all of these other things, okay? The next thing that we were going to move on to, let me make sure I covered everything, yep, okay. The next thing we were going to move on to is talking about religion. Because remember, earliest humans, religion is a way to explain that, okay? Today, Thor, I believe, is sad because it's cloudy and there was some rain when I was coming in. The rain stopped. All right, so maybe Thor stopped crying, so that's why the rain stopped. All right, and I just picked Thor at random. All right, could be any god. All right. Now in this case, though, little by little, this begins to change. All right, because there's all these kinds of things that we need explaining, that we need to happen. All right. Now, before we move into this, all right, because it kind of has to do with what we talked about on Friday. What other group of people now begin to form or rise up?
Clergy.
The clergy, yeah, priests. We need the people to explain the will of the gods to us. Okay? And so in this case, basically, and another, once again, you got to know the P word, all right? What is polytheism or polytheistic?
Many gods.
Many gods. Belief in many gods. All right? Most societies during this time are polytheistic. All right, so let's get that in our head. All right, I know, most religions today are monotheistic. But in this case, basically it was the gods that controlled everything. And us as humans was our job to try to understand their will. And for that, you can be the priest today. We have the priest to explain, all right, what the will of the gods is. And of course, because at any moment they could make rain, they could make thunder, they could make it cold, they could make it hot, all right? We have to try to keep the gods happy, all right? But this belief that the gods controlled everything became the basis, all right, for various festivals. And many of our holidays, okay, have to do with these, just looking for the eraser, these attempts to please the gods, okay? In fact, the word holiday breaks down into holy day, okay? That's where we get the word. All right, so all of these things were meant to try to keep the gods happy. Probably the most significant ones, or at least some of the early ones, at some point in time, humanity began to divide up time and break things down. And when they saw that there was a new year coming, all right, that became the basis of a celebration. Okay, today, do pretty much every culture celebrate a new year? Yes. Okay? Doesn't matter where you live. All right, not everyone does Thanksgiving, just FYI, that's strictly American. Canadians have their own version, but it's in October. All right, and there's a couple other ones. All right, no one celebrates the 4th of July outside of America. Okay, no, not a big deal. Okay, but pretty much everyone has some type of New Year celebration. Okay, and of course, some of the earliest festivals that happened, all right, had to do with nature cycles. Okay, they recognized when we went from springtime to summer, and from summer to fall, and from fall to winter. And so there were many holidays for the solstices and for the equinoxes and whatnot. Okay, the summer solstice is in June. Okay, winter is in December. All right, I don't have to mention how many holidays fall around December, and it's not just Christmas. All right, there are literally dozens of them celebrated by different groups. Okay, so it becomes the basis of our festivals, number one. Number two, okay, we begin to see, and this could be my own cynicism, but between the kings, between the rulers, and between the religion, all right, in order to keep the people following the rules, okay, priests begin to tell the people, the king is chosen by the gods, all right, and if you don't follow the king, all right, the gods will be angry and will cause all of this destruction. All right. What does the king do for the priests in return?
Keeps them in power.
Keeps them in power. Yeah, protects them, supports whatever and so they kind of watch out for each other. Okay, in this regard. All right, and so yes. From earliest times, and if we look through history, many times governments and religion are basically like this. Okay, where the religion basically tells the people that it's the will of the gods, that the king is doing whatever, or that this person's going to be our king, and of course the king then protects and gives a position of power to the religious organizations, whatever those might be. Okay, the one thing you do need to know, Z word, all right, ziggurat. That is the ancient Mesopotamian temple. That's where the people went to pray to the gods and to offer sacrifices to the gods. Okay, so ziggurats. What was a ziggurat? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Oh, wait, let me skip over this one. All right. This is an artist's conception of what it was. Basically, kind of almost pyramid-like. You had steps, you went up, and up there is where you conducted your prayers and where you gave your sacrifices and where you honored the various gods. Where do we get the idea that this is what it was? Well, different parts of Iraq, you can still find the ruins of ancient ziggurats in different places. So yeah. One thing, and this is, obviously if you're going on to study more history, no matter the culture, for whatever reason, humans have always believed that the gods dwell in the skies, whether it's one god, whether it's 10 gods, whether it's 50 gods. It's always up there, okay? The ancient Greeks believed that they lived on Mount Olympus, Olympus being the tallest mountain in Greece, okay? So they were always somewhere up there, okay, type of thing, all right? Now, we learn about the ancient Mesopotamian religions because there is a writing, okay? It's literally the oldest novel there is, and I think it's only the oldest because it's the one to survive, but it's the oldest one to survive, and it is known as the Epic of Gilgamesh. I had to read this in high school. I don't know if they still make people read it. Every now and then some students are like, yeah, in 11th grade we read like parts of it, or in 12th grade they made us look at some of the passages from the Epic of Gilgamesh. Okay, and so from reading this, all right, number one, we learned that Gilgamesh was a Sumerian king, okay? if you recall, and I promise I'll come back, but I need to find the map. The cities pretty soon begin to unite into very basic countries, and Sumer was this area, okay? And so he was a ruler, he was king over that part, okay? I'm not going to get into the story. It's about, or the entire thing. Gilgamesh is a fairly decent king. I think his wife dies. I haven't read it in years. And so he goes off on a rampage. He's angry and depressed and just starts, destroying shit and killing people and all this other stuff. And so the people of Sumeria pray to the gods to help us, like our own king is trying to murder us, type of thing. And so they send a companion for Gilgamesh, another man named Enkidu. And together they go off like on adventures, and they go hunting, and they go into battle, and all this other stuff. Okay? Well, why am I telling you this? Why do we put this? It's the Epic of Gilgamesh that kind of gives us the clearest view into the ancient Mesopotamian religion. Okay? Number one, we know that they were polytheistic. We know that they believed in many gods. Okay, several gods are mentioned. Okay, the sky gods, the earth gods, the water gods, the tree gods, the wind gods, the rain god. There was literally a god for almost every element in nature. Okay, and they had certain powers and they controlled certain things. Okay, number two. Even though the novel basically focuses on Gilgamesh and Enkidu, the gods had the same personalities as humanity did. They were just as temperamental, they were just as petty, they were just as whatever as you and I. Okay? They had the same faults, they had the same weaknesses, and so yeah, if you pissed off one of the gods, they would curse your family, or they would, send a flood and destroy your farm. They would do all of that stuff. And so basically, as humans, it's your job to live a life that would not piss off the gods. All right, you just kind of want to fly under the radar, make sure no god notices you, all right? And that seems to be like a common theme through most ancient cultures. Most people are familiar with the ancient Greeks and, Zeus raping your daughters, or ladies, Zeus raping you, having babies, and then his wife Juno, that's the Roman, Hera, coming and exacting revenge. Never on Zeus, though, always on the poor girl that, was seduced by him, type of thing. And so yeah, okay, you have these spiteful, angry, temperamental, jealous, petty gods, all right? And so we learn all this from looking at this novel, all right? We already did the ziggurat thing, okay? Now, once again, time goes on, all right? And we begin to see then, we're going to talk a little bit more in detail how we get this ruling class, because remember, okay, everything starts with a warrior king, okay? The strongest, the best hunter is the king, okay? Eventually we move away from that, all right? Now, it does become, do I write it up there? No, I don't. It becomes hereditary. That's because I'm going to say it. It becomes hereditary, okay? Which means the oldest son of the king, you're going to be a boy now, is the next king. And then the oldest son of that person is going to be the next king. And then the oldest son becomes the next king, and so on and so forth, until, we run out of sons, or there's a revolution, or the country gets taken over. Okay? And so, but obviously, now that we have not just a city to govern, but little by little we're putting cities together into very primitive countries, okay? The king cannot handle everything on his own, all right? So we begin to see then the rise of these hierarchies. Okay, yeah, maybe there is a person who is in charge of the war, of warfare. Maybe there is a person in charge of commerce and money. Okay, maybe there is a person in charge of building and fixing roads. Okay, but obviously, you know, our warrior here is the most important one, and then we can't leave our money out. Okay, and so we begin to see then, and we can't forget our spiritual guidance. Okay, because the priest is not only the one that tells people to follow what the king is saying, but the king also believes in the gods and you know their jealousies and their pettiness and stuff. And so the priests are now there. They're, you know, almost co-equal. Like, hey, king, you're going to make this one decision, but you know, let's be sure, let's run it by a couple of the gods and make sure that that's what the gods want to happen. All right. And so in this case, you know, we begin to see then, all right, this division where at the very top we have the king and we have the head priests that are basically in lead. Okay, you have the political power, you have the religious power. Obviously, the king is still on top, all right, but, all right, we have those two, all right, at the top of the social structure. Below them, you know, I have the bureaucrats, if you want to write underlings, yes, the people that actually run things day to day, the ones that push the papers, the ones that make things actually happen. Because it's not the king that, you know, grants you your building permit to have a new canal, all right, from the Euphrates River into your farm, all right? That's someone else, okay? Perhaps the king ultimately signs, all right? But that's someone else. That's the people that kind of do all the things day to day, okay? And so now we begin to see that division, okay? King and priests at the top, okay? People who run the government, the next social class, and of course, you know, we still have you can still hear our woodworker, all right, we have our stonemason, we have our wagon maker, we have all of this stuff, all right, they're next in the social class, and then at the very bottom are the everyday workers, okay? This is where the farmers are, this is where the unskilled labor is. I put there not slaves because the slaves were even lower, all right? And we'll talk a little bit about slavery because slavery has in fact existed since humanity first created civilizations, all right? But it wasn't the way we think of it today or the way, you know, it eventually turned out. Originally, slavery, two cities go to war, guess what happens to the losers?
Slave.
They become slaves, yeah. Had nothing to do with color, had nothing to do with race, had nothing to do with gender. It was strictly, our city won, your city lost, you guys are now the slaves, okay? And of course, it wasn't like a perpetual thing. Eventually, the children would, you know, be born free. They'd be part of this new, bigger, you know, kingdom or this double city, you know, little society. Okay? Now, of course, when it came to individuals, once again, remember, society was patriarchal, which means it was focused and established according to a male, okay, dominated society. But also, all right, it also had to do with the eldest male. So it doesn't matter. You're married, you have your own family, okay? And of course you have brothers, all right? But if dad is still alive, okay? Doesn't matter if you're 45 years old and you've got kids and a wife and your own job and your house. Dad's still alive. He's in his 80s. So guess who you go to consult still? Who's still like in charge of what you do? Okay? Dad. All right? And once he dies, then you're kind of like on your own because now you've got like your own sons. All right? And of course, it was the husband's job to protect and support his family. Once again, sorry ladies. Babies, cook, clean, keep the house. Oh, and as long as you're having babies, you have to make sure that they're male. All right. I know. Abby kind of chuckled, but for thousands of years, people believed it was the woman's fault if girls were born or if boys were born. Like it was. Those of you that have taken basic biology, who actually determines that? Yeah, the guy. It's your sperm that does it. All right, has nothing to do with the woman. All right, but obviously, if you can't have boy children, if you just have 10 kids and all 10 of them are girls, obviously there's something wrong with you, ladies. You're defective. All right, and so yeah. We're not going to talk about the Middle Ages here too much, but that's why Henry VIII kept, killing his wives and marrying new ones, because he wanted a son. They were all just having girls. All right, it's obviously their fault. Okay, now a couple of things then that happened during this time period, in addition to the technology. All right, we've talked about the wheel. We've talked about metal. Okay, and those are obviously huge. Those are also very important. But it's the Mesopotamians, specifically the Sumerians, who developed writing. Okay, before this time, okay, how did humans keep records before writing?
Drawings.
All right, drawings. You just pointed at your head, but sorry, he actually said it. Stories, yes. And in this case, no. But he has a point, because at some point somebody is assigned to be the official rememberer. Okay, I know. Yeah. It's not a real word, but that's basically, you're in charge of remembering. And you tell the stories or the poems or whatever. And of course, when he has a son, then tell him all the stories, tell him all the poetry, tell him all the stuff. And now it's the next generation's job to be the rememberer of everything. Now, obviously, is it possible to do that? No. I mean, there's going to be some details left out, obviously. Okay? And of course, what's the problem with an oral tradition? If you've ever played the telephone game, if I tell Abby here that the sky is blue, by the time it gets to, I want to say Zach. Yes, I almost just called you Haskins, all right? But by the time it gets to Zach, the phrase might be, I hate tacos. All right? Yeah, how it went from the sky is blue to I hate tacos. Well, one of you guys here in the middle, all right, changed it, forgot it, didn't hear right, made up your own, decided to, mess with Santos, whatever, okay? And so, yes, and so as society becomes more and more and more complex, it gets harder for there to be a rememberer that can keep track of everything, okay? And so, the earliest writing that is developed by the Mesopotamians is what we call a pictograph, okay? Which is basically a picture representing something, all right? In this case, sometimes these pictures would represent a sound, all right? I suppose the most logical, because cows go moo, and moo is, then I'm going to draw a cow every time I want the sound, all right, to be illustrated, type of thing, okay? In other forms, a symbol could just be, an abstract concept, okay? So I'll go with, emojis could be seen as a pictographic language, okay? So I could just draw a happy face to represent happiness or joy or contentment, okay? If it wasn't like an actual word, all right? That abstract concept of happiness, okay? So that was basically, the writing, the earliest writing system. Now this you do need to know, I am going to ask you on the test, all right? The Sumerians specifically, okay, they invented a writing called cuneiform. All right. Some people pronounce it cuneiform. I've learned cuneiform. Don't worry, it's not an oral test, so I don't care how you say it. All right. But where basically they would take mud tablets that were kind of wet, they would etch these symbols in it, and then they would let it dry. Okay. And so this then became the way for them to keep records. All right. Now, the issue, or the thing is, okay, and even up until, let's say, 75 years ago, okay, I'm just going to hold this up, not everyone could do this. And in fact, even today, there's people that may not be able to write, all right? In ancient times, just because we have the invention of writing does not mean that everyone can do it. Only certain people are taught how to do it. Okay, and so we see the rise of a new group of people. Remember, started off with farmers, everybody was a farmer, then we begin to develop new skills, all right? Then the ones that can't do shit, become the priests, okay? Of course, we have the rulers and all that other stuff, but now we need the writers, okay? The people that learned how to write and kind of keep that, you know, as a secret, all right? And so the profession of a scribe, okay? So sorry back there, we don't need rememberers anymore, okay? You just lost your job. So you either learn how to write, or you know, now we have a new group, all right? These scribes, the ones that are responsible for writing everything down. Now, that's not to say that writing was limited, all right? Obviously, you do have the scribes. They learn how to write and to read, okay? But who else? Would the king be educated? Yeah, okay? Even though it's not his job to write stuff down, okay? He does need to sign, all right, all of the decrees, and he does need to be able to read, you know, the stuff. Would the priests know how to read and write? Oh, yeah. Because, you know, they're the ones writing and making up the religious stuff, and they're the ones that are, you know, reading it back to the people and stuff like that, okay? Other professions, it would kind of depend, okay? Some of them probably could read and write, others probably could not, all right? But it's the Mesopotamians, specifically the Sumerians, that are the first to invent writing, okay? Now, just FYI, and I think I mentioned this before this time, everything is considered prehistoric. So it's like not the Stone Age type of thing, okay? But prehistoric just refers to before writing, because now people can start to write down the history, all right? Now, the things that we have found, because surprisingly, we have found so many ancient clay tablets in the various ruins of these ancient societies, okay? Number one, obviously, okay, we have found historical, you know, things, all right? So we know, all right, something about ancient Mesopotamian history, because that's what a lot of the tablets contain, okay? Number two, we learn about their economy and their commerce, okay? One of the very first, when archaeologists like in the 30s discovered all of these things and were able to finally decipher cuneiform, the very first thing that they translated was basically a receipt. Okay, I sold Levi 10 bushels of wheat. He provided 3 pieces of gold and 2 baskets of apples and a wagon. And so it was like, oh, okay. A business transaction. And a lot, and it's funny, you know, you get kind of disappointed because a lot of people conducted business. And so a lot of the tablets that were left over were, in fact, these records of the transaction. Why would you want a transaction record 10,000 years ago?
Oh,
Yeah, no.
I'll say in case something was forgotten.
Okay.
I gave you big gold.
yeah, I could claim Levi never gave, no, he didn't. Here's the tablet to prove it, dude. All right, here's the gold. All right, or here's the fake gold, or here's whatever. Okay, so yeah, that became important. All right, as commerce. And once again, we haven't quite gotten to where humans start using money. All right, we're still mostly on a barter society, but little by little, okay, especially when you start dealing with gold and other precious gems, you want to keep track of that transaction. I wrote there people's history because, yeah, some people would go to scribes and hire them to write down their own personal histories, all right? Kind of like a diary or a journal, because remember, not everyone knows how to write. Not everyone can read, but, you know, I guess you want to provide some sort of legacy. And so you go to a scribe, you tell them your story, they write it down for you. In addition, a lot of prayers, a lot of temple stuff, you know, because obviously, what are you supposed to say to the gods? Okay, and so fortunately, and for those of you who are Catholic, probably understand. Fortunately, the priests have already written it down for us. That's all you gotta say. Just say it. Okay, there you go. Okay, and up you go to the ziggurat, and you repeat your prayer. Okay, and you got your cheat sheet or your cheat tablet. All right. This is how we know a lot about Sumerian history, especially. Okay, some of the other parts of Mesopotamia, not so much, but in Sumeria, in the southern part, they just kept a list of their kings. Okay, they started to write. Someone was like, you know what? I bet, like, you know, Mr. Santos, 12,000 years from now, is going to want to share the list of kings with his history class. So we better just write all this down. All right, and they did, and it's kind of funny. But yeah, obviously historians have had a great time, you know, figuring out and piecing the history of this area together. Okay, one of the most interesting ones, and I think I talked about this just a teeny tiny bit when we looked at creation narratives, in these Sumerian records, and there's more than one that we have found. There is a story of this great flood happening. Okay, where basically it just rained for a long time. All right, it doesn't give specifics. I know those of you that are Christian or even Jewish, if you read the Old Testament narrative, it talks about 40 days and 40 nights. The Sumerian narrative doesn't give a time period; it just says a very long time. All right, but basically it wipes away huge areas of the countryside. Like, people lose their homes, lose their crops. And in fact, one of the cities, Uruk, it gets washed away completely in this flood, all right, that happens. And so there are, as I wrote up there, some similarities to the biblical narrative. Dude with a giant boat and a menagerie of animals, no, that's not part of the Sumerian narrative. All right, but some of the other things, the fact that it rains, the fact that it covers up cities and washes even one of them away completely. Okay, you see some similarities. And like I said, it's kind of interesting because it's not just one record that we found, it's several, and we've found it in different parts. So it was a pretty widespread flood. All right, did it cover the whole planet? Well, we haven't really, you know, found a record in like Africa. Yeah, we had a big ass flood, except for the Yoruba, all right, or in other parts, okay? And then finally, of course, I've mentioned it already, the Epic of Gilgamesh. I mean, there might be older stories, obviously, but this is the oldest written story. And if you've never read it, I strongly, like I said, I had to read it in high school, but I strongly recommend it. You can find it on Wikipedia, just Google it. I mean, I'm sure it's free. It's, you know, beyond the date of, you know, the patent's expired. So I think you can just download it and read it. It's pretty interesting, okay? You know, and kind of gives you a perspective, all right, into what the Sumerians, what the ancient people were like. Now, these I just stole from Google Images, all right? These are some examples of Mesopotamian cuneiform tablets, all right? Don't ask me to focus in on them. I mean, some of the stuff you look at it and you're like, huh? Yeah, kind of indecipherable, but Once you look at them, once you examine them closely, especially with, magnification, then you can see the symbols, you can break down the alphabet and get an idea. All right? And so, once again, okay, remember that over hundreds and thousands of years, these settlements become villages, these villages become towns, and cities, and those begin to unite. Those city-states begin to come together, okay? Whether it's by conquest or mutual agreement, it's all different depending on the area, depending on the circumstance, but they do form very, very primitive countries. And so, as I mentioned, in southern Mesopotamia, and this is where, they're the ones that invented the writing, they're the ones that, invented a couple things. We get the country or the kingdom, I should say, of Sumer, because they're all ruled over by a king, okay? Back when I was a student, back when I was in your position at your age, it was called Sumeria. They've since changed it. I guess when you translate thousands and thousands year old documents, there's various ways. And of course, modern historians have agreed that it was more than likely pronounced Sumer. Okay, I put there Sumerian, that's the adjective. Okay, so we talk about like Sumerian ruins or Sumerian writing or Sumerian kings. Okay, the cities in central Mesopotamia united to form a kingdom called Akkad. Okay, and the adjective for that, Akkadian. So, Akkadian kings, Akkadian writing, Akkadian ruins. All right, so you have southern Iraq, central Iraq. I don't write it up here because it's not part of our narrative yet, but the cities of northern Mesopotamia, they become a kingdom known as Assyria. Don't worry, we will talk about the Assyrians, all right? They're a special people, okay? But why do we focus on this really quickly? Well, because one of the Akkadian kings, a man named Sargon, he, the cities in central Iraq have come together, all right? They're a kingdom. Basically what he does is he wants to expand. And he's like the first king of a large group, not just a city, not just like two little cities, but this large area, to then raise an army. And first he goes south and he conquers Sumeria. Okay? He conquers Sumer. I still use the old name. All right? He conquers Sumer. All right? And basically, when he gets there, he finds that the Sumerians have invented writing, they've perfected the wheel and wagons and like all this other stuff. They have the secret of bronze, okay? And so he's able to take all of that, okay? And it's basically because of Sargon that we begin to see these different things spread to other parts, because Sargon doesn't stop just with Sumer. All right, he does conquer some other areas. So he's called the Great because he's like, as far as we know, the first, I guess, empire builder. Like he conquers a different country and then brings it into, his influence. All right, it wasn't just a city conquering a city. In this case, it's this whole kingdom taking over another kingdom. All right. And so this shows then, as I showed you this on Friday, the brown area is Akkad, all right? The purple area is Sumer. And so Sargon conquers this, and then eventually the Akkadians also conquer Assyria. And so for a while, the Akkadians, pretty much controlled all of Mesopotamia, all right? Before we get into Egypt, and this I don't put up there because I want you to focus up here, probably the most important thing that the Specifically, it was the Sumerians too, okay? These people, all right? In addition to inventing writing, all right, they figured out a way to calculate time, all right? Now, most early cultures, okay, adopted what we call a lunar calendar. And a lot of cultures still use it, all right? What do we mean by a lunar calendar?
Moon. A month is like a full moon cycle.
Yeah, a moon goes through its entire cycle in 28 days. So it's a 28-day month, okay? Now, it works great if all you're worrying about is the moon, but the Earth revolving around the sun doesn't quite follow that pattern, all right? But we'll worry about that later because, it's Julius Caesar that kind of perfects that, okay? But a lot of cultures already had a lunar calendar because it was one of the easiest things to base off. But when it came down to smaller increments, not a month, not a year, not whatever, okay? The Sumerians came up with a system that broke everything down into periods of 12s and 60s. How many seconds in a minute? How many minutes in an hour?
60.
How many hours in a day? Which, if you divide it by 2, is what? Okay? In 11,000 years, we haven't come up with anything better. For reals. I mean, here, I have an old school watch, so it kind of breaks it down. All right? It was these guys. Okay? Now, when the Akkadians conquered them, they're like, well, holy shit, that totally makes sense. All right? Now, are there imperfections in it? There are. And I'm, once again, I'm a nerd, I'm a weirdo. There's this concept known as leap seconds that are added every now and then. You can Google it and find out when the next day with a leap second. But you need an atomic clock to be able to see it. I happen to have 2. They're cheap. You can buy them anywhere now. But when it turns to the next day, my clock in the seconds, it breaks it down also into milliseconds and stuff. You can actually see when they add a leap second, all right, type of thing. Because things tend to not really work out completely. But have we come up with anything better? No. We're still calculating time in 60, 60, and 12s. All right? So it's kind of damn, those guys are smart. All right? I don't know. Maybe one of you will discover a better, so 30, 30, 30, no. Whatever. All right, guys? If you haven't dropped off your assignment at the table, do so on your way out. Email it to me if you don't have it.